And the website that I'm going to be mentioning frequently, and you guys can tell me if there's others. So I want to talk about the Yes iPool, and would you want yours on there also? Anybody else? As far as you guys are, and then is there one for you?
What? I'm sorry.
For a website that might be helpful for parents. And if there isn't, that's fine.
Not law enforcement that I can think of.
Okay.
There's just nothing.
Okay.
Law enforcement really isn't.
Okay. And I can just say, I can look for that on Google that. Yeah.
It's probably in our
Okay. Good. Okay. I think I have my glasses.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Ruth York with the Idaho Federation of Families, and this morning I'm joined by a member of the Boise Police Department and two parents. We're going to talk to you about when the police respond to your child's mental health crisis. We have Sherry Cameron in the middle with the Boise Police Department. Our two parents are Vanessa and Margot. I'm going to hand this facilitation off to Margot. And we have lots of people listening online today. This was a very engaging topic, clearly, so enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Ruth. And thank you, Vanessa and Sherry, for being here today. It is a difficult topic, as we know, and unfortunately, as parents, we have had encounters with the police, and this is of smaller children up through teenage years. And I always like to think about my friends with typical kids, and sometimes they'll say, oh, you know, that's a phase or whatever, and I'll say, oh, and how many times have you had to call the police to your home? And that usually kind of stops that discussion for a little bit to give people an understanding of how it is to be a different parent. I wanted to begin just by giving some stories from friends of mine, also in the parent network, who have had to call the police and have had an encounter. And then if anybody else would like to add to that, just so we kind of have an understanding of people who are listening or watching, maybe they can relate. And we're all coming from this from a little bit different directions, but I think we're all kind of on the same page when it comes to calling the police. So this one mom did say that she has a 9-year-old who both of these encounters happened at two different libraries. But one thing I wanted to address specifically is, depending on where you live in Idaho, you get a different response. And you're specifically from the Boise Police Department.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I'd like to kind of delve into that a little bit too. So her son does have ADHD and DDMD, and we're going to be using a lot of acronyms today, and maybe we can discuss that too. But he got very angry in the library. He went outside. He tore apart 2 young trees. This was in Caldwell in 2018. 6 police officers arrived and helped calm him down by taking him calmly, or talking to him calmly, and then they drove him to the emergency room for evaluation. She said that they told her that there was a psych ward for children in Caldwell that would help him, but in fact they didn't at that time. I don't know if they have one now, so that was some misinformation. She also had an encounter in Utah, which we won't get into, but then here in Boise, again, this was a son who is 12, ADHD, DMD, anxiety disorder, depression, and at the library, a different library this time, she had coaxed him out of the library. He was getting agitated. She explained to the librarian that he had special needs and that she needed her to call the police, which she did, to help keep him safe. She found him some booster medicine, which she had for moments like that. And when the officers arrived, she explained the situation, and they stood at the back of her car to keep the situation safe while giving her room to talk to her son in a soothing manner. His med did kick in. He chose to go to sleep. She thanked the officers, and they left. And she gathered them all together, and they left the scene. I will tell you, I had an experience also where one Boise police officer and one Garden City police officer did come. My son was escalated. He felt trapped. They were kind of getting around him. He started to throw rocks because a lot of these kids, they get very protective. They feel that they're cornered and they do a lot of things that are just that basic nature to protect themselves. And when my husband finally got to my son to help him, to hold him down, one of the officers came up and put my husband in a chokehold and took him off my son and said, "This isn't your, you can't do anything now. This is our case." I can't remember the word he used, but basically they didn't want my husband involved anymore. They did handcuff my 10-year-old, put him in the back of the car and took him to the hospital. So those are some situations of police being involved. I think it's an extremely difficult situation for any of us, whether it's parents or officers, especially who do not know our children. So what is your just preliminary take whenever you hear some of these stories, and you being a mom of a special needs child? If you could start off our conversation.
Absolutely, Margaret, thank you. So yes, as you mentioned, I do have a child that has special needs as well, several different diagnoses. He's 14, and I myself have had 2 separate encounters with law enforcement, another agency with my son. So I come at this from not only that perspective of being a mother and having that law enforcement involvement with my son, but also being a police officer myself. I've been with Boise for 21 years, and because of the encounters that I've had many years ago is what really drove me to start training our officers with Boise. That's kind of where it started.
And how long ago was that?
It's been about 6 years now.
And did you go to the police, or how did that?
It was from the first encounter. My son was actually in 3rd grade. At that time, he was, again, in the beginning of 3rd grade. He was not very big. He weighed about 42 pounds. And when I got to the school, he was actually handcuffed, and 2 officers were on top of him while he was face down. From that, I actually went back to my department and talked with my administrators, and I said, as officers, we go into all types of situations where we have training, and there's knowledge and training out there for us to be better equipped to walk into these, at least doing a better job, having a better resolution. Why are we not being trained? So that's what kind of started me training locally. I will tell you that in our area of Ada County and Canyon County, I've been doing that. It needs to go further. It needs to go across the entire state of Idaho, and we're not there yet. So for parents that are listening, when I talk about the response by officers here that have been trained, that isn't necessarily going to be the same response that they may see in other areas of the state, because they don't think that training has reached everywhere yet. We're trying to.
Do you know if it's reached anywhere beyond Ada and Canyon counties?
I know that it also has been in Oregon, because I've actually been asked by Autism Society of Oregon. I've been training for about 5 years all over Oregon as well. I, again, would really like to see that go further than where it is right now, because as officers, we're expected to show up to a scene and maintain peace. Well, when you enter into a mental health area, most officers do not have backgrounds. We don't have education, we don't have a master's degree in psychology and mental health. We get, the officers get just that very basic intro. Now we're getting better about having mental health training for officers, but again, that's, maybe a 40-hour long week where they're going through mental health training. That's not going to give them everything that they need. So when I do training for officers, what we encourage them to do is talk to either the therapist, the caregiver, the parent, whoever has the expertise and knowledge on that individual, whether it's a child or an adult. That's the person who's going to be able to help the officers the best. What we are hoping from those individuals when we show up is that as an expert, if I come to your house for your child, I would ask you, help me understand, how does your child communicate? What is going to escalate them further, because we want to stay away from that. And what is going to help to de-escalate the situation? You tell me how I can help you, instead of us rushing in and pushing all the parents away. Because again, let's use a typical situation. If I respond to a teenager that has no mental health issues at all, I may ask everybody to step aside to protect them while I try to figure out what's going on. When we have a special needs situation where we've got any mental health, we need the help of the parent or the caregiver to help guide us in that call. So it's very unique on how we do it. In addition, when police officers are trained, all the training that they receive in the state is based off of typical brain activity. We know that in crisis, there's not typical brain activity, and even in a normal state, our kids, our loved ones that have special needs, do not take in the information and process it the same.
No.
So everything officers learn about reading behaviors and watching for signs that are non-compliant, or even tactics we use to control somebody, operate off of pain compliance, where we know in crisis state, they don't recognize pain.
Yeah.
So again, we really need to partner together, the officers as well as whoever is there that can give us the knowledge on how best can we handle that. The example you gave of the parent with the library, where she got her son outside, was able to give him some medicine, and the officer stood back. That's exactly the training that I provide for them. Ask the parent what they need. Stay back, because numbers can actually make the situation worse.
Yeah.
So in that case, that's a great example of the officers getting direction from the parent instead of coming in. And that's not going to happen every time. You know, again, I don't want to put it out there that is always going to happen. There's going to be times where you're going to have maybe new officers where they don't understand, maybe forget. In the case with, you know, your husband being taken away from that situation. Again, it's an ongoing. We need to continue that training and that knowledge, because it is completely opposite of what officers get trained in the beginning of their career on how to handle.
And speaking of parent input, we want to remind you that if you're on Zoom, there is a Q&A button that you can click on, and you can send us questions about this, which we would love to hear from you. If you're on YouTube, there is not a Q&A button, but you can do a chat button, and they will also get those to us. So please, if you have any questions, we might be coming up with it, but just to cover all bases, please let us know what you'd like to talk about, because this is your chance, because Sherry has a lot of really good information. And speaking of parent input, so Vanessa, I wanted to ask you, have you done the accommodation registry? And are you familiar with that?
I am familiar with it. I have not done it. I've gone back and forth. In our situation, my daughter can be one end or the other. I struggled with what to put on the accommodation registry. So,
was it privacy issues also, or?
I wasn't necessarily concerned about privacy issues, but as far as what is going to help her to calm down on one given day, it's not necessarily the same as another day. The biggest thing would just be, like Sherry was saying, that the officers need to ask me, what's she been like the last couple of weeks? What phase of the cycle are we in? And what's it going to be that will be helpful today? Because it's always something different.
And do you have faith that you're going to be able to talk to the police officers before they are going to have interaction with your child?
But they usually see us at the same time.
Okay.
And we've had lots of experience starting at age 7, and she's 13 now. And it's different every time.
Do you get the same police officers even, depending on the time of day, or no?
No. We've had a couple officers that have come twice that I get to know a little bit, and we've had some really great ones and some who are not so helpful. it depends on the person who shows up and the day and the mood and all of that.
Yeah. Like for all of us. And we do have a question.
We have two questions. First off, for the officer, are you familiar with the CIT officers in Ada County?
Yes, I actually do part of the training for the CIT, both in Ada County and Canyon County. There's a lot of different instructors, so it depends on which county.
Right. And the second one is for the parents, do you know the process of getting your child on the accommodation registry?
Yes, because
And maybe before we talk about that process, for parents that maybe don't know, let's make to explain the accommodation
Yeah,
registry.
well, you would probably be the better one to explain. I have mine with us because we were kind of back and forth, similar to you, because the questions are pretty specific. And I can go over the questions that are on them if that would be helpful, because it's only a one pager. It's a front and a back, and you basically, like Vanessa was saying, you say what are their triggers, what could be helpful, and yeah, and it's hard to say exactly what. And my answers became very short because I'm like, I'll give them a general idea, but hopefully I'll be there. Hopefully they'll talk to me first. But I wanted that security of knowing in case they encountered my child before me. I didn't want them to do anything that was just going to escalate it and make things worse, to harm my child, mentally or physically or anything like that. So how would you like to approach this? Do you want to say what it is and how you get it?
Actually, if you want to talk about the process that you went through, and then we can fill in and make sure that we answer the question.
Okay, well, yeah, the process was basically making that decision. And then I believe you sent it to me, didn't you?
I can't remember.
You can't remember. Okay. Well, I will go over what the questions are. And do you think, and are there privacy issues, would you say?
I think one of the concerns overall, as a parent also, I think that parents are we are naturally concerned about our child, of putting information out about any diagnosis they have, as well as medication, and that it possibly might be used in a bad way, right?
Mm-hmm.
We that's kind of a general feeling that parents are gonna have. What I would like to encourage parents that are listening, and even to relay to friends, family, other parents, is that the more information that we can get ahead of time, the better off the officer is up front in preparing for being at that scene and handling it in a better way than if they didn't have the information. Maybe 15, 20 years ago, there was a different mindset. But now in this day and age, I can guarantee in all the officers that I've worked with, all the agencies I've worked with in Ada County and Canyon County, they are on board to make sure that the officers have a better resolution. And that doesn't mean that we're going to show up and take the child away in handcuffs or the adult away in handcuffs. It doesn't mean they're going to jail or juvenile detention. It means that we are recognizing that there is different alternatives to these types of calls. These are not always criminal offense type of calls. So with the top down pushing that through the agencies, I think that my hope is that parents understand that the privacy of this, or the reluctance of having a registry, that starts to diminish for them, and that they're more willing to fill this out. Because the more I have, if I come to your house and I know the triggers, I'm going to stay away from them.
Yeah. So, like I said, it's a one pager, and after just the general information about, numbers to contact you and addresses, and they ask about certain things that you don't even have to fill in, but we put the doctor down and things like that. But you just check yes or no to access to weapons, threat to self, prior suicide attempts, threat to others, prior injury to others, hallucinations, delusional, substance abuse. You check yes or no to that, and then you can provide a brief description, and they give you all of like 3 inches and maybe 2 lines to do that. So it can be as brief as possible. And then on the other side, you just put in, it says what I can do to help myself. And there you can put a crisis plan, and you can attach that if necessary. What it looks like when I need help. And you can list some things there, what others can do for me, what I do not want others to do, which is a really important part of this, I would say. And then I thought this was an important thing to mention that they're at the very bottom before you sign, it says that you release this information to be entered into the multi-agency Ada County CID data system to be used by law enforcement agencies as governed by Idaho public records laws. This permission may be rescinded at any time by contacting the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare Mobile Crisis Unit. And then they give the phone numbers and also for the CIT coordinator, CTI.
CIT.
This is the thing with those glasses again, CIT. We'll say it's the paper that's not really clear. They're not my vision, right?
I think you hit on a very important thing though, and that is that the permission of that can be rescinded at any time.
Right.
So if a parent decides, you know what, I don't feel comfortable, they can rescind it. The other part that you read in there though that is important for parents to understand is that this is for law enforcement.
Right.
So it is no different than if we take a report in any other realm in law enforcement capacity. Everybody, I think, not everybody, people get concerned about there being the public records request. Personal, private information is not going to be released.
Is that because of HIPAA or something else?
Nope, that is law enforcement sensitive information. You have to, people that actually request any type of report or any records from us have to give a reason why they want it and have some validity to it. So if I came in to request a record on someone else, they're not going to give it to me because I have no right to it. So you really have to show that you've got some need for it. And even if I did have a need to have it, information will be redacted from it. So in the case of minor children, that isn't going to be released. That is going to be protected. Part of it in this realm is going to be HIPAA because of the medical aspects that are in there, but also the privacy of a minor child. So that definitely protects.
One of the, as far as the process of it, but where do you find it? How do you get linked up to the accommodation?
And I think did you get that from Mobile Crisis, from Health and Welfare?
I can't recall because I thought I got it from you in an
I
email.
did not send it.
But yeah, you can also get it from, let's see, the Health and Welfare Office. And I bet if you just Google the accommodation registry, Idaho, or the Department of Health and Welfare, it'll be on their site and you can get it there. And speaking of other important websites that all parents should have at their disposal with these special needs kids, first of all, we are being hosted by the Idaho Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. You can always go to them for information. And then Vanessa, for me, and I'd like to ask you too, really important sites are the YES site. And if you just Google YES, Y-E-S, Idaho, and you'll see Youth Empowerment Services come up. And then also iPool, Idaho, which is I-P-U-L, and then just Idaho, and then you'll see Idaho Parents Unlimited come up. Two really great resources. Is there any other website that you really like for either state specific or generally speaking, either about this or anything in general?
I feel like those two are the best. And I actually prefer calling them on the phone.
Yeah.
There are great people at the Federation and at IPOL who can help walk you through what's going on in a crisis.
Yeah.
And I would agree with that. Sometimes it can be overwhelming online, just trying to navigate through a system versus having that person, especially at both of those locations, like we talked about, Vanessa, that it's other people that understand. So taking that time to call, have them help you through it and get that information. If in doubt, I really would refer parents to Health and Welfare and go through them if they have any questions or any doubt, especially about the registry process. I think that's probably that one-stop shop for everything as well. So I would encourage parents to do it. And I would really encourage parents to consider doing that because of the information that is in there. As an officer, I want to know when I respond to a call. If your child, and I'll use an example I had, I was on patrol and I had a child that there was domestic violence in the home between the husband, who was the aggressor. He also had been abusive to the daughter. She's on the spectrum. She was at the time 6 years old, and her mother prior said she does not like brown-haired women. And my partner was female with brown hair. And so I did not have her going with me because that would have shut the child down. In that case, had I not known that child never would have talked about anything to me. Leaving her outside and talking to the child, she was able to tell me what had happened. And there, that way we're able to protect her. So that is the value of that information for us, because otherwise we would not be able to help. And we have a question?
Yeah, so this is a two-part. So first off, the two questions about the accommodation. There is someone from Health and Welfare on saying that their contact number is 208-334-0981. And she says, you won't be able to Google the document, it's private. Parents have to call us and meet with us to fill it out. And that it's only available in Ada County at this time.
Okay.
So those parents who are watching, just for your information. And then we did have one, can you clarify how officers get this information when a call is made?
Yeah, and Sherry, along with that, because that was the next thing I wanted to get to, and thank you very much for your questions, guys, we really appreciate it, is, first of all, so the police procedure, when they get a mental health call, kind of like step by step, if that registry is the first thing that comes up, and then related to that, if there have been multiple calls to the police, what different approaches have officers used when dealing with a mental health crisis, and how do they work for your family? And is there a difference whenever they encounter older and younger children? So maybe younger than 13 when they're going into the home. So kind of like that step by step, if you can go over that.
And I will, and if there's questions that come up, just let me know. We'll pause and take the question, because I want to make sure that I'm addressing parents. That's what's really important today. And thank you, Health and Welfare, for being online.
Yes.
They're awesome. And my hope is we're going to get that registry out further than Ada County. I have every intention of continuing training and doing all I can to make sure that our entire state has the tools that it needs. I am super passionate about this as a parent and an officer. So let's go from time of call. So we're going to use Vanessa. If Vanessa, let's say she's at home, her daughter is out of control, she's in complete crisis, she's alone maybe, she's got her, let's say she's
alone with little kids in the house.
She's alone with little kids in the house, so she needs some help. And if she places that call, either 911 or to dispatch, she's going to get a dispatcher on the phone. The dispatcher is going to first ask her, police, fire, paramedics. That's the first thing they need to know. And then they will ask if they have the registry. They're going to have some information. If they don't have it, then they're going to ask some of the questions. Now, what I want parents to understand for Ada County is that I actually have been training dispatchers on what to ask in mental health crisis calls. What do they need to ask? What do they need to relay to police, fire, and paramedics? With paramedics, generally, they're going to go hands-on, meaning they're going to have to touch the child. If it's medical, they need to know right away, does your child like to be touched? Do they not like to be touched? How can you help us? So medical calls, right away, we know that there's going to be some hands-on with the first responders. With police, what we need to know, what help do you need? My child is out of control, maybe there's a med change and you want your daughter to go to the hospital. So that information is going to be taken by the dispatcher. Then police, fire, and paramedics, all three, we have mobile data terminals in our vehicles. So that call with the information will come on a screen in front of us, and whatever she provides to dispatch, I'm going to be able to see on my screen. So if she doesn't provide anything, let's say, I'm going into it blind, which for an officer is very frustrating because we want to help. We really do. Officers want to help. But when we have no idea what's going on in the home or what's the call, is there mental health? Is there medication? What are the triggers? How can I de-escalate? If we don't know that going in, it's blind. But if Vanessa provides all that, I am so far ahead of the game when I get there. In addition to the training of dispatch, is training for the officers on our approach when we get there. When we come in, we are responsible for all of the officers that show up. So if dispatch sends 4 officers, I may get there and decide, you 3 stay outside, and if I need you, I'll have you come in. Because we know by sheer numbers and new people, upsetting the schedule, the child's already in crisis. So we need to be more aware of how we respond. When I get there, I'm gonna talk to Vanessa first. Give me a brief, what can I do to help you? What do you want to see the outcome? Recently, I had a situation with a child that had diagnosed on the spectrum, the autism spectrum. She had depression, anxiety, bipolar. She had a very full host of diagnoses. The parents, it was kind of what I'm saying right here, the parents actually called, they needed help. The child was destroying things, and what the parents wanted is her to go to the hospital. Now, in this case, the child was 11 years old, and we knew that, given the state when we showed up, that to get her to the hospital in a police vehicle was going to be more traumatic. So what we ended up doing is calling paramedics and having her go with paramedics, little softer uniform. They have a gurney that's like a bed, and then they were able to put her in the back of paramedic unit and transport her to the hospital. And we assisted in making sure that the child and the parents got there safely.
So one
And
other,
there's a question.
oh,
I'm gonna interrupt you.
that's all right, let's do it.
So is the registry accessible to first responders who respond to a scene of an accident? For example, a moving vehicle accident.
So that would be, unfortunately, a variable answer. It depends on where the accident took place. So knowing that the registry is only in Ada County, then only the Ada County dispatchers would have access to that. If it's on the border of Candy County or there's no registry, then we're going to go into that one. Now, my tip for parents, since I am on here, is that it is very helpful to have something in your jockey box or your glove box about anybody in your family that has mental health issues that we know. Because in the event that we show up to a motor vehicle accident and the parent is unconscious, we are not going to be able to maybe understand what's going on. And one of our biggest fears is that can escalate a crisis for the individual because the parent is now unconscious, and the risk of that individual getting out of the vehicle, getting struck by another vehicle. Are they injured? How do we communicate? So I would encourage parents to please put something in your car, a sticker on the window, something where we can readily access it. Not only us, but paramedics or fire. For paramedics, they're going to need to know medical information. What is the child, the teenager, or the adult? What medications do they take? Are they at risk of seizure? Very important for us because when we respond with lights, and we know that lights can be a trigger for seizures. So that's the type of information that we really need to know. And if you can put that in your glove box, it's helpful to have it because in the event maybe dispatch doesn't get it or there's not all the information in the registry, please provide that in your glove box for me. I would really appreciate it.
Thank you. That's good to know. I've gone through phases where I keep a little one-pager about the history and the issues so that I can show it to police or hospital staff or whoever we need when we're in the general crisis phase, but I had not thought to keep it in the glove box.
It is so important to have it there. It really, really helps us, and it helps if we know that there's maybe medical injuries. Paramedics need to know what medications they're on, because the last thing they want to do is, sedate them or do something else that might interfere with medication. So it's really helpful if we can get that.
We have another question.
Yay.
And can I also say the disembodied voice is Susan. That's who you're hearing ask the questions. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So, and you might not have the answer to this, but is there any goals being made at this time? I think I read those. Is there any goals being made at this being implemented for a statewide registry in other counties throughout Idaho? And I'm sorry that
That's
I
okay. We understand
read
that
very
question.
wrong.
And if there isn't, how could we do that? How do we start
To
to?
my knowledge, there is not yet. I know that we have health and welfare online, so I'm hoping that they might put some information in there that we can read out loud. I would love to have it implemented. I am more than willing to work with health and welfare and making sure that that happens as well as training across the state. So I'm definitely in full favor of making sure that it's out there. And I think by doing this webinar, we also get the ability for parents to understand why the registry is important.
And about that one pager, I wanted to go back to that too, because is it easier to communicate to a police officer, for instance, just with a regular traffic stop? I had a regular traffic stop with my son, and me trying to talk to him first, he did not want that. He's like, ma'am, and I wanted to tell him, my son suffers from anxiety. So is that piece of paper something that he's not gonna try to shut me down with immediately? If I handed him a piece of paper that said, please don't approach the car or talk to my son, it's gonna. Does that work out?
And I think even aside from saying he's got anxiety, my child has mental health issues, to prompt the officer to immediately say, help me understand what I need to do, how to make this more successful. But that piece of paper, you definitely can hand that to the officers as well. On a traffic stop, officers, no matter who it is, are going to ask for driver's license, registration, proof of insurance. Those are the three.
Right.
Give them that and say, here's a piece of paper about my child I'd like you to read.
Okay.
And then when they go back to their motorcycle, go back to their vehicle, they can open it up, look at it, and then make sure that when they reapproach, that they are doing whatever information is going to help that be more successful. If your child is in crisis on a traffic stop, immediately, my child has mental health issues, he is in crisis right now. That immediately should prompt the officers, and that's part of that training I do, is if you see that the child is in crisis and the parent tells you to back off, you tell me what I can do to help. So if it's shutting the lights off, let's get to a safer location. We're gonna get you off the roadway, we're gonna get you someplace else. If we can safely turn our lights off, we're going to. If I need to stay back until you tell me to come up, then we're gonna do that. Now for parents out there, what we need for parents to know is that safety is still a concern for us.
Mm-hmm.
So what we need parents to do is, as you are talking to your child and de-escalating them, letting us know what you're doing. So saying it loud enough that they can hear you, that we can still see what's going on the best that we can. If it's getting out of your vehicle, opening the door, talking to your child to get them de-escalated, we can see that happening. But keeping in mind that safety is still a concern for us as well, that's helpful on both fronts. And then the officers will reapproach when it's safe to do so. And we need to be led by the parent. Okay, you can come back up, he's de-escalated. And if it helps for us to talk to the child or the teenager or the adult, I don't want to focus on just children. If it helps for us to talk to them, we will as well. And there's many times that we'll just chat with them. We do have stickers. We also have, there's a couple things I want to talk about, and then I know there's a question. We have stickers, we have teddy bears, and the other thing that there has been a grant recently through Idaho Post, through Juvenile Corrections, that they are putting together kits for us to have in the police cars with different fidgets and different textures. So we will shortly have those in the back of our car, which if we can, have those for the parent, it will be helpful as well. So we can even, give them something or let them play with it to help de-escalation.
And distract.
Yes.
And
we have 2 questions.
Yes, the first one, would you suggest a medical bracelet of some sort?
I always suggest a medical bracelet if the child or individual will wear it.
right.
In the training I do, that's one of the things I tell officers, don't look for it, because most of the time, most individuals will have some type of sensitivity, and so bracelets, they may have them, but if you expect it, it's not going to be there. The other thing though for parents to look into, if they'll wear a medical bracelet, great. If they'll wear a necklace, then get them one that has information on it. If those don't work, can they sew something into the clothing, if that's an option, or maybe have something on their shoe. So looking at various things for that specific individual that will not create any sensory issues for the individual, but if we can have that on a person, that's great. For example, if we go to somebody that's wandered, and we have no one around, mom is gone, the caregiver is not available, that would help us name, address, phone number, and medical information that is life and death. is what we'd really need to know. That's helpful because in that state of crisis, even if there's verbal, it's gonna be gone. So anything that would help us find, mom, dad, or a loved one very quickly is helpful.
And then the second one is, must you be a resident of Ada County to register, or can someone outside of Ada County register their child/ward as a precaution in case there's an incident while the individual is in Ada County lines?
I would direct them to health and welfare on that. I would think that they would be able to, because if you are in Ada County, we'd be able to access that information. But I'm gonna refer them to health and welfare, call them and sit down and talk with them about the restrictions or the guidelines for it.
And we've talked a lot about this accommodation registry. Do you have the number still, Susan? 344?
Yes, I do. So 208-334-0981. I have also put it in the chat
Perfect.
on Zoom. If you want to go on there, you'll be able to pull that up at any time.
Okay, so 208-334-0981 if you're interested in more information about the accommodation registry or getting the paperwork. And I think we kind of stopped our conversation when we were talking about kind of the step-by-step what happens. Too many questions. Okay, enough with the questions. Just kidding. But so you said that first the information would come up.
Yes.
And any information. And so what are some of the next steps?
So a lot of that, and I love your answer when you're talking about your daughter with your interactions. They've been all over the board. That's pretty much what officers, when we get there, we're going to be looking at the parent, the grandparent, the caregiver, whomever called us, what it is they're wanting. So do you want your child to go to the hospital for reevaluation? Or are they, suicidal at the time? Do they need to go to the emergency room or go to maybe Intermountain Hospital, someplace else? We're looking for that direction from parents, and I think that's really that shift for law enforcement in the training, is that prior, as a parent, our fear is police come, they're going to take our child away and put them in juvenile detention. Or if they're 18, they're going to handcuff them and take them away to jail because they destroyed the house or they hit their parent. In crisis, we know that's going to happen. Or even better, police show up and they hit us. They're going to battery on an officer. However, with the training and with the education of the officers, is them understanding now that that is not necessarily a crime. There is no intent behind that. They're in crisis. Does it make it fun to be hit? No. But it doesn't mean that it's a crime. So what we're really looking for is, when I get there, you tell me what you want me to do with your child. What can I help you do? How can I help you de-escalate this? Is it just to calm the situation and leave? Or if the child has wandered away, we get a lot of the wandering, the escape artists, or maybe they had a really bad day at school, they come home, they're in crisis, and they run from the house. That's not a runaway. That's not a juvenile status offense. That is a crisis situation. So now I need to know, where does your child go? Who's close enough they've walked to? Where do they usually go? What are water sources around? What are other dangerous areas around, so that I can get officers out? And if we have a medical emergency, they haven't had their medication, maybe they're at risk of seizure, they're diabetic, on top of everything, then we need to get the community involved as well. And there are ways to do that with our community, doing a code red through Ada County, which alerts all the surrounding area around your house of a missing individual. So it really depends what our response is to what the parent is wanting when we get there.
Does that speak to your question too about transport in case we can't transport them?
Right. The one really piece of advice I wanted to share with parents is to stay calm and have a plan. And you may not know what sorts of plans are available. In my experience, the plans I can make are either we need a ride to the emergency room or we need a ride to juvenile detention, depending on the state of medications and the mental state of the child and how intentional it is, because sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's not. So for parents to just be calm and tell the dispatcher right away, I've often said, I need a CIT officer to transport my daughter to the hospital for a mental health crisis. That simple. And then the officers are able to come in and take over the restraint, because if we're at that level, then my husband or myself is probably restraining her. So we have one officer take over, the other officer will talk to parents for a minute. And then the quicker we can just move along to the transportation that we need is the better. When my daughter's in crisis, I cannot transport her. That's just,
And most parents can.
years ago, we decided that.
Right.
And it helps when officers just understand that.
And we have another question.
Actually, I'm going to ask you all to make sure that your audience knows what CIT stands for when you refer to a CIT officer.
Crisis Intervention Team.
I want to clarify one thing though. I want parents to know that we actually do not have the CIT officers. All officers have to go through the CIT training. So they're not designated as a CIT, which is fine if you ask for one. What dispatch gets from that actually is it's a mental health. They immediately know, so then it triggers them to ask specific
Yes,
questions.
and that's what somebody coached me on years ago, that if you ask for a CIT officer, like in my case, my daughter doesn't want everyone to know that she's having a mental health crisis. So I can say, I need a CIT officer.
Right.
Yep.
She continues with what's going on.
And I saw a polling sign come up.
Yes, so we do polling, and that's something that you, again, can help us with. Polling, and it comes at the end, is that right, Susan? Oh, right now it's happening. Oh, so now you're gonna be quiet. It's happening right now. So if you could fill out some polling questions, then we can improve our webinars, which is gonna help all of us in the end. So thank you very much for doing the polling, and thank you for all your questions, and keep them coming, because we have about 15 minutes left. Gone very fast, but there's so much information, very, very good information. I wanted to ask you, because school, of course, is such an important part of our child's lives, and police getting called to the school whenever there are mental health crises. What is the role of police, and can there be more discussion about police intervention in schools? Because in my case, it just heightens everything. It makes and I'm not saying that the police are not doing a good job, but the child feels safe within the school kind of building. And then the police come in, everything gets heightened, and it all goes, out the window. And fortunately, I've been able to work with my one son's school that the teachers will call me first, and then I race to get there before the police do. And I usually win. But so what is your opinion on that, or the police?
So the police in schools, when we're talking about high school, I'm talking about junior high, there are school resource officers, and that's not specific to just Boise Police. Meridian has them, there are Ada County SROs, school resource officer, Canyon County has them as well. So school resource officers are in a vast majority of the schools. Now that relationship, I think, is really important with parents. Any parent that has a child with special needs in school. Because I think one of the things that gets forgotten or maybe left out inadvertently is that when you have an IEP meeting, you can have everybody there that is going to be contacting your child. I think we forget about having an SRO in those meetings. And for an SRO, again, a school resource officer, if Vanessa's child is in my school and I'm the school resource officer and I'm in that IEP meeting, I know her daughter, I know her triggers, I know how to de-escalate, I know who to contact, and I'm building a relationship with her daughter because she knows me. So you take away some of the fear, you take away some of the fear of this unknown person because I'm now known to her. And for school resource officers in the schools, part of the training that we're doing, and I'm actually working on a training specifically for officers in schools about the IEP meetings, but for them to go to the classrooms, the VIPs, the ERR rooms, all the special ed rooms, so that they're popping in times that there's not crisis.
Right.
Because I am a huge advocate that law enforcement should never be used as a threat.
Mm-hmm.
For any officer to be utilized in a school setting is, if you don't stop this behavior, I'm calling the police. That isn't okay. That puts fear into a child or an individual against police, and they should never be afraid of us.
Right.
So I encourage parents to actually meet school resource officers. Now, in elementary schools, you're not gonna have an individual one in the schools. You may have one that has 5 or 6 different schools. However, meet with that officer, have them meet your child. I encourage, again, parents to have them in those IEP meetings to get to know that student so that they can help, because there begins to be a relationship so the de-escalation can happen versus having strange officers that have no information about it. Now, for the officers that are not in school settings, part of the training that we are doing with them across the board is when you go to the school, asking if the child has an IEP, asking to see the IEP, and then going from there. Because to walk in completely blindsided, I may walk into a school and they say, we want this child arrested. Well, if I don't know anything about the child, I might do that. But if they're in crisis, they have mental health diagnosis, they have an IEP with a de-escalation plan, I also have a duty to make sure that I'm looking at that and seeing if that's been followed and if we really have a crime.
And did you say you could do that before? You can invite officers who might be visiting at the elementary level at least, who might be visiting, they could actually look at it before? You can give that okay?
Well, generally with the elementary school, there is one SRO that has 4 or 5 different schools.
Okay.
So unlike high school, you'll have one officer in each high school. Part of that is based off of age. So there will be one, but asking the principal, who's the SRO of the school? Getting the name and the number of the school resource officer and meeting with them ahead. Absolutely. Here's my son or my daughter's IEP. I want you to meet them, and just having that conversation. That breaks the ice for parents right away.
Yeah, that's terrific. And I see we have a question, but
Yes.
is there something before Vanessa?
Yeah, I have an example of what you're talking about with getting to know the school resource officers. So in my daughter's middle school, the school resource officer is fabulous. We've been building up a relationship with him and the whole school staff for a few years now. There was one time when he was out of the building when she was in crisis and the school needed immediate help. They called me and they called the police at the same time because that's what our plan is. The officer that responded was not familiar with my child or her IEP or me or anything, and he was demanding that I come take her home from school. That's against everything
Right.
Yes.
in her crisis plan. I tried explaining to him, no, I am not going to bring my newborn baby and my toddler to witness their sister's crisis, and it is not safe for me to transport her. If she's not safe to remain at school, she cannot come home. We need another plan. The principal later called me and apologized for the officer who was not familiar with anything going on there. When the school resource officer got back to school about an hour later, she was able to calm down and finish out her school day because he did go through the plan and
Exactly.
had a relationship built up with her.
And that's a perfect
So-
example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that not only takes away some of the fear for parents towards law enforcement, towards police officers as well, because we are only people. And most all of us have kids. And there's a lot of us that have kids with special needs. So to then meet us, you're going to develop that rapport, that relationship, and the benefit is to the kid. I mean, let's face it, it's really
Well,
for
and
the
some
child.
parents too.
Yeah, it is.
It's
I
so
know.
hard. You know, we struggle and we feel all of it too, but
Yeah.
absolutely. for-
We do. We
for
feel
our
everything
kids.
for our kids.
Yeah.
But
But there
for
was
the
a question. Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
for that child to have that relationship like your daughter did with the SRO, immediately you're gonna see her start to de-escalate faster than any other strange officer coming in because she's already established some trust and relationship with them.
Absolutely. What was the
And the
question?
question?
So I just wanted to, okay. So just so anyone who is on there who is raising their hand, feel free if you have a comment You can put it in the chat box, or if you have a question, to put it in the Q&A, so that we can then respond to whatever you would like our panelists to respond to. And we
And we
just
are
really appreciate the interaction.
Yeah, and we are getting short on time though, so we'll try to get as many questions as we can. And thank you again for being such a great audience today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you everyone for your participation today.
Let's see, is there anything that, we're very active parents because we have to be. Is there anything, especially in parts of Idaho that don't have this support yet, this system set up? Who do we talk to? How can we fill in these missing pieces to get, the help that we need?
That's a great question. I wish I had a great answer.
Do we go to legislators? Do we go to our police department?
So for people that are outside of Ada and Canyon County that are listening, I would absolutely encourage parents to go into your first responders, police, fire, and paramedics, and request that there be training, that there be a lot of these processes put in place. It's going to be driven by the people in the community, partly, as well as working with health and welfare in the various areas, the different offices, is helping to get that training put in place for all first responders. Not only can you do it for first responders, but much like this webinar, you can take, maybe do a block for first responders, and on the back end of it, do one for parents in the community. Here's information. Here's the top 10 things you need to provide to any first responder when they're showing up. So I definitely encourage people to start requesting, demanding that take place, and that we get that training across our state, because we don't have it everywhere.
Yeah.
And so some of these places, unfortunately, I know Eastern Idaho, Northern Idaho, if you guys are listening, there's been some very bad examples of interactions, and it didn't have to go that way.
And would you say, Vanessa, that the parents are talking more about their struggles and getting the word out there? And is that mostly the important thing too, that we just have to communicate what's going on in our families and not try to push it under the rug? Because
I think that's so important. I mean, a lot of people don't want to talk about these scary, hard things that are happening, but if we don't talk about it, it's going to keep happening.
And I agree. I am actually going to share this. I know we have a few minutes and you have a question. Even though I am in law enforcement, you would think that I've already mentioned I have a son that has mental health diagnosis. You would think that I've never, would never have gone through this. As a parent, I've been on that side. My son was arrested. He was 12 years old. He was arrested and taken to juvenile detention. So as a parent, that was incredibly distressing for me as well, to watch my son go through that. And given his mental health state, he thought he was going to be taken away forever.
Yeah.
He was devastated that he was never going to see me again. And to have to go through that as a parent, trust me when I say I can relate to all parents out there who sometimes want to keep that private, and it's painful. But if we use that, that's what helps get the knowledge out there. And that we also understand that we've been through this, that we're not alone. There's a lot of us, and that's what helps. Those are the stories that I use when I train first responders, is all these parent stories. So when you share them with me, know that that's what I share with first responders, so that they understand, because again, they're parents, their aunts, their uncles. We care about kids. Law enforcement, by and large, we care about children. So those stories impact them. They want to do better when they show up to these calls for service.
did you have your moment of, do you know who I am?
No, I've had a complete moment in full uniform of crying and completely falling apart.
Yeah.
I'm trained to do my job, and when it came to that, I couldn't even think. And then somebody dragged me to juvenile detention to pick up my son, and I was devastated. And like many parents, it unfortunately, it was a case of using law enforcement as a threat. And the person involved had no idea of my son's disabilities, his IEP, his de-escalation, and it became not about that. It became about something else for the adult involved. And so that can happen, and it's going to happen again. I don't pretend that it's never going to happen, but we can minimize it by doing these webinars, by you parents doing the registry, by us getting it across the state for all of our first responders, by parents going to the police stations and the firehouse and taking your kids and seeing this stuff. that's the education, that's the awareness, and that's the power for us.
And the parent network is the power for us,
Can I
right?
make one more comment? I think as parents of kids with special challenges, a lot of times we feel like we have to fight. We have to fight the school to get the accommodations we need. We have to fight the therapist, or, you know, we have to fight for our kids all the time.
Yeah.
But if we can turn that around to feel like instead of fighting people, we are collaborating, where we can be educating the police officers and the schools, and we can be working together. Just changing my attitude from I'm fighting with these people to get my kid what she needs to we're all on a team, we're working together, we're all humans doing the best we can. We're able to get a lot more done.
Agreed. And I think we had a question. I think we might have just
Do we
enough
have time for it or
question.
no?
Oh, 1 minute.
And while she's transcribing that, so again, some really important websites, and you can always just look for the parent network, which is great, and that is statewide, and we can give you a lot of resources there, and that can be found at the Yes.
There's a link to it from the Yes website, I believe, or you can Google Idaho Parent Network for Children's Mental Health.
Which is a short thing to remember. Oh, and Ruth has appeared. Ruth,
Yes.
what's going on?
Again, with the Federation of Families, first off, I want to thank you so much for this very engaging discussion. I think this definitely, the conversation we've had and the participation in our audience is going to warrant a further follow-up session. And I just wanted to come in and ask each of you individually if you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience.
Oh, boy. How many hours do we have?
Final
It's okay,
thoughts.
I mean,
Well, I will share only that after the horrible experience that we had one time, the next time that a Boise police officer showed up, he remembered about my son, and he didn't even park the car in front of our house. He parked a couple houses down. He didn't get out of the car. I went to him, and I will never forget him. He was wonderful.
And I want to thank all the parents when I show up to the mental health calls. Thank you to all the families in Boise that you have provided me the information, helped me do a better job for you and for your family, and keeping your trust in us.
Okay, my piece of advice for parents is to remember that you're the expert on your child. And even though this is crazy, scary, overwhelming, you may be an expert like Sherry and still totally unable to handle it. Amid all of that, remember that you're the expert on your child. And you've made it through all of your other hard days before, and so you'll make it through this one too.
And thank you
I'd be
so much for
confident.
joining us.
Thank you. Yes,
Thank
thank you,
you.
everyone.